So today I want to talk to you about Himalayan balsam. It grows along the canals and rivers at the moment, it's August, along with some other tall pink flowers, and it can easily get mixed up. Behind me I've also got greater willow herb. You also have another willow herb that grows by our canals, which is much more pointy at the top with its pink flowers. That's rosebay willow herb. They're both epilobium. But what I want to talk to you today about is Himalayan balsam, hidden amongst the willow herb in a canal near you. Himalayan balsam is a really interesting plant. Its Latin name is Impatiens glandulifera, and that comes from impatient, as in impatient to burst out, and glandulifera, gland, as in a kind of small container, and fera, bearing fruit. So if I show you closely, what we're going to talk mostly about today is the seeds, but I want to talk about the whole plant and how clever she is, really. And again, a bit like with hogweed, where I feel quite defensive, I'm very defensive about Himalayan balsam because it has a bad reputation. So I just want to put a few things right. So it's a very fast growing self-seeding annual, and it can reach about 2 meters tall. I have seen them about kind of 9 feet tall. Now the thing about that height is it comes with very, very shallow roots. So even at 9 meters tall, if you pulled one up, you could see roots that are just maybe less than 12 inches. So compared to its height, its root structure is not very substantial. And that's one of the problems with it, which we'll go on to look at in a minute. But where it comes from, in about 1839, it was introduced into our country as a pretty decorative plant, and it came over about with the same batch of decorative plants as giant hogweed. So they kind of came over together, if you like, to decorate our gardens. And just 10 years later, Himalayan balsam was labelled invasive, just 10 years after it arrived. And the story is the same throughout Europe. It's known as an invasive throughout Europe. In England, it's listed in Schedule 9 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act, where it is actually an offence to cause the spread of this. So when we do forage the seeds of this, we need to be very, very careful not to kind of facilitate further spread of it. In some areas, you might have heard of balsam bashing Sundays. I'm not very fond of that idea because I think anything that encourages a community to be so destructive with plants isn't really very good. There's other ways we can deal with the invasiveness of this plant, and we'll look at that. So the problem caused by the invasiveness of this plant, the fact that it grows everywhere and anywhere and outsmothers other plants around it along the riverbanks and canals, what happens is you just get a wall of this plant so other things can't grow. And the problem with that is when it outcompetes the other things, because it's so tall and with a very shallow root structure, the root system of plants that usually would have held the riverbank in place, it's not there with the root of the of Himalayan balsam because they're just so shallow. So by outcompeting the plants that would normally be holding the riverbank with their roots, it means that the riverbanks are starting to experience erosion where there is a lot of Himalayan balsam because its roots are not capable of holding the soil, and it just washes away. So that's one of the reasons it's not very popular. A, it's outcompeting our usual riverside plants, and B, in doing so, it's failing to give the riverbank structure, so we're getting riverbank erosion. The other reason it's not very popular is there's one idea that it's actually allelopathic. If you've done a permaculture course, you will know that what allelopathic means is some plants can exude, either at root level or gaseous exchanges, chemicals that inhibit the growth of plants that are growing near them. And it's a bit of a competitive advantage for that plant. So there is some thought that this plant, not only is it tall and smothering plants out by its mere size, it's also potentially allelopathic and inhibiting the growth of other plants around it. There's a third reason why it's also not very popular and said to be not very good at supporting mixed diversity by waterways, and that is that bees and pollinating insects love this plant. And that's great, but what happens is, apparently, I have read that if there's lots of plants there, they will go to this an easy quick fix, and in doing so, not pollinate the other plants that need it. So there's a few reasons there you can see why this plant isn't very popular. In Wikipedia, it says about the seeds, it labels it aggressive seed dispersal. Well, I want to challenge that. because Wikipedia, it's not aggressive seed dispersal. This plant is a genius, and we'll look at that in a minute, okay? This plant is absolutely adapted to survive. So what are some of the ways that we've tried to control it in the past? I've already mentioned balsam bashing Sundays, where you just bash the plant down. You have to do this obviously before you get these seed pods, otherwise you're just dispersing the seeds. So balsam bashing needs to be done before the seed heads arrive. There's another method where they've introduced rust fungus, which is a biological control method to see if that will destroy some of our stands of Himalayan balsam. There's a third attempt at controlling it, in addition to balsam bashing and introducing rust fungus, and that is this prefers to grow by waters that have experienced eutrophication. So eutrophication happens to our waterways when there's a lot of nitrogen fertilizer in the agricultural fields, in the arable fields around the waterways. What happens is the rain carries the nitrogen fertilizer into the waterways, and it increases the growth of algae and various other plants within a waterway, and it makes it a very high nutrient content where otherwise it wouldn't have been. So this plant loves that fact. So one suggestion is to try to reverse the eutrophication of the waterways, and then that will facilitate the growth of our more native, mixed, diverse range of waterside plants, and it would be disfavourable, if that's a word, to Himalayan balsam. My preferred method of controlling Himalayan balsam is what I really wanted to talk to you about today, and that is because it spreads by the seeds and it's absolutely ingenious. I'm going to tell you in a minute, it's not aggressive at all, Wikipedia, it's ingenious. So how she spreads is she's got these teardrop shaped seed pods, as you can see, and one plant can have nearly 1,000 seeds held in these little pods. Now these pods have got kind of tiny little springs in them, and what happens if you push past them, you trigger the spring action and it pops the seed, and the spring flings the seeds about, it can be 7 meters radius from the plant. So sorry, if the plant's in the middle, you've got 7 meters, from side to side that can be covered with the seeds. That's some power that is bursting out the seeds out of their pods, so that they can get quite far away from the mother plant, which obviously is the parent plant's goal, is to get her seeds to travel as far from her as she possibly can. So what is really clever about that, not only is the spring itself really, really clever to get the seeds to go further, but by the fact that she is actually a waterway plant, it's ingenious, because if you've done some of my other foraging courses and you've learned about plantain, I told you about the seeds on the plantain head ending up being carried and then landed. So this is another example of how a plant uses the resources around it in order to spread the seeds further than it would left on its own. Yeah, so left to its own devices, yeah, it can get them that far, but by growing next to water, and she knows that she can cast her seeds, her babies, into the water, and they can get carried miles and miles and miles. So how clever is that plant? Yeah, sending her babies on their long waterborne journeys. So schedule 9 is about to be broken, sorry, but I am going to catch these seeds and eat them, just to show you how my favourite way for managing the seeds, how delicious this method of managing the Himalayan balsam seeds is. Oh, so there we go, it's popped. Now inside, oh, I'm slowly being bitten. There's only a few seeds on this one, let me get some more. Yeah. Oh, there we go. So inside there are seeds that are pretty big. I'm going to show you in a minute, hang on. You see the size of them? Those flies tried to get on for a meal already, look. So I'm going to just get the petals out of there, because what I want to show you is there's two different colours of seeds here. There's some brown ones and there's some creamy coloured ones. You can also get them a really dark brown, almost black brown. There we go. You can eat the seeds at any colour, so whether they're creamy, pale brown or dark brown, they're all edible, and you can eat them raw. So for an easier, safer way of picking them, you would obviously put a carrier bag over the head and then pop them, or you could have a sieve and just kind of put the sieve underneath and then pop them. So you should not be allowing the spread of this. So these seeds here, they have a taste of macadamia nuts. They're like a really creamy, it's like a creamy hazelnut, like a macadamia and a hazelnut. I've had a nut child. That's how it tastes. So these are actually my youngest son Matthias's favourite. When he was little, he used to go out and eat them. So the seeds is the thing that I think is the best part of this plant. Other people talk about being able to eat the other parts of the plant. The stem, you can see the stem, it's hollow. You've got these big lancelot kind of shaped leaves and these hood-like purple flowers. But there's something I want to talk about the rest of the plant, and that's that it contains something called raphides. If you ever have heard that you can't eat the little like cuckoo pint, it's a tiny like little arum and it's got the red berries on and it's only about a foot tall. If you've ever heard you can't eat that plant, the reason is the same, it's the raphides. Raphides are crystals of calcium oxalate, and they're like needles. And the reason that plants have crystals, particularly raphides, crystals of calcium oxalate in them, is to prevent grazing animals. So I know people say, oh yeah, you can graze your animals on balsam and also on willow herb, which I've got a lot of around here. I have a sheep, right? And I like to observe what my sheep does and doesn't eat. And he doesn't eat this, and he doesn't eat the willow herb. Now, with the idea that raphides are there for to prevent grazing, and we start grazing this plant, we're going to experience the same problems with the raphides. Now, what happens with the raphides in plants, I've explained why they're there, to prevent grazing. If we then eat this plant and we get the crystals of calcium oxalate in our mouth or in our throat, it can irritate them to the point where you're coughing, you might swell up in your mouth or your throat. It's actually really dangerous. Now, the good news is you can reduce calcium oxalate by boiling and agitation. So a good boil so that it goes into the water, and a good agitation as well at the same time, all right? So, but the best part of this plant is the seeds. And not only are they delicious, then you will be helping to prevent the spread of this. I'm no videographer, but I hope you found that useful and that you'll have a new love of the genius that is Himalayan balsam, Impassion glandulifera. She does stink a little bit when the sun is on her and you're walking down by the canal. It smells a little bit foisty, but the seeds are definitely worth trying. So enjoy.